Afternoon, everyone. So it's all go. It's all go. We're going to be discussing Robert Jenrick and maybe Jeremy Clarkson today. I may have to do it. Well, I think I probably am going to have to do another live stream this afternoon, specifically on the Green Party leadership contest, because that's been announced now. Zach Polanski's won that. So it might be worth discussing that. So watch out for that this afternoon. But I was thinking, like, August, because we've had a proper silly season this year for the first time in years. So it was like there was no news. I had to have a completely different approach to doing videos this August. And because nothing really happened. I mean, there's international news. Like, obviously, Trump was still doing stuff. That's not affected by our parliamentary recess. His stuff in Gaza, you got stuff Ukraine, bits and pieces like that. But British political news, not really very much. It's basically just different flavours of Nigel Farage talking rubbish. And it ends yesterday. Parliament returned yesterday. It's all kicked off. There's loads of stuff going on now. I'm thinking, Christ, what do I choose? So I'm trying to sort of stay on top of all of it. Not necessarily anything massively spicy, but still lots of things that need discussing. So let us begin, just because of the order it all happened this morning. I mean, just to point out what's going on today, in case you need catching up. So I'm going to discuss Robert Jenrick first, who may have come quite close to being arrested. Got away with it in the end by behaving himself. And then Jeremy Clarkson's been a funny bunny. And then Zach Polanski made this afternoon. And then I'm going to try and finish off my series on the What If Trump Dies. And then this evening, UK time, 7 p.m. But I think it's 2 p.m. Eastern, isn't it, in America? There's going to be an unusual press conference. Now, there's all sorts of things swirling around. I'm not going to treat everything as sacrosanct, but there's talk that the route between the White House, because this press conference is in the Oval Office, the route between the Oval Office, or the White House specifically, and a particular medical centre, the roads are being cleared. So, people are speculating, is Trump actually genuinely really ill? And is his press conference today about that? And is he going to resign? All sorts of stuff going on. All sorts. But let's begin with Robert Jenrick. So, for those who don't know, Robert Jenrick is a bit of an arse. He is trying to convince people on the right, in Reform UK and the Conservative Party, that he is a pucker gammon, right? Because he didn't used to be. He has to work hard at it because he didn't used to be, right? He used to be a moderate Tory, a moderate, what you'd call one nation Tory. Corrupt, sure, yes. We know from the sort of that sort of dodgy property deal he tried to push through, but nonetheless, moderate one nation Tory. Whereas, and a lot of people don't believe that he claims, so he went to work in the Home Office under Suella Braverman. He was the immigration minister. So he's moaning about asylum hotels now. He's the one who put one in place, right? But he claims he learned things there that completely changed his point of view. Now, I'll tell you what I think happened, and I think a lot of people on the right think happened. So after Liz Truss fell, Rishi Sunak, he was a supporter of Rishi Sunak, big supporter of Rishi Sunak, right? Because, of course, one nation Tory, and they all supported Sunak. They thought he was like the moderate choice. And I think a lot of people on the right think, that Robert Jenrick saw the way the wind was blowing. They realised that Rishi Sunak was going to make an arse of it. And because Rishi Sunak was moderate, I mean, they called him a Marxist. The people on the right wing called Rishi Sunak a Marxist, right? Anyway, so he saw the way the wind was blowing. He realised that when Rishi Sunak failed, the direction, it would have to go in the opposite direction, because that's what happens in politics. If a party goes in a particular direction and it doesn't work out, they don't think, well, did we just get some things wrong, but the general direction was right? No. They go, no, the direction must have been wrong. They never actually think to themselves, maybe our leaders were just incompetent. So it's always the direction that must be wrong, because of course our leaders can't be incompetent. So it was obvious that the Tories were going to shift further to sort of the culture wars. They were going to lean into culture wars after Sunak, right? So Jenrick just wanted, because he wanted to be leader, he just positioned himself where he thought the Tory party were going. That's what he's done. He's positioned himself where he thinks the Tory party will be when it's time for him to become leader. Didn't quite work out for him because a lot on the right don't trust him. But he's really been pushing it. So this summer, he's actually been breaking the law. Because again, forget about the Conservative Party being the party of law and order. He's been breaking the law. He first of all was filming on the London Underground without permission. It's against the rules. He's then been like up in Newark, which is an anagram for what he is, which is his constituency. He's been putting flags on posts everywhere, even though the local authorities have said, can you stop doing that? We're going to have to take them down. Remember, the issue with putting these flags on the posts, it's not about like a expression thing. It's a safety thing. You know, even the Reform UK Council in Durham has had to take down bunting that people have put up because they've been using rope that's too strong. Like bunting is supposed to be quite fragile, basically. Like if a lorry goes down a road and catches it, the bunting should come away. But the stuff that these idiots were putting up is so strong that actually if a lorry went into it, it'd pull the bloody post down rather than the flags. So anyway, so same thing with Jenrick. The fact of just climbing these things, what if you have an accident? So the council can't obviously allow people to do this because then they might be liable for any accidents that these boneheads, you know, get into. So he's been breaking the laws there. But then he broke a much more serious law. So, and this is as reported in the Liverpool Echo. I have put a thing in the description below. So there's been a criminal trial taking place, which is now over, so people are free to talk about it. But when there's a criminal trial in progress, you've got to be very careful about what you report on it and what you say about it. You mustn't prejudice the trial. Because then two things can happen. First of all, you could get a miscarriage of justice, right? Because the jury aren't locked in a bubble. They still read the news and stuff. I mean, you're advised, I think, to keep away from it a bit. But, you know, you're still aware, you're still part of the world. So if you've got a senior politician, Robert Jenrick is the Shadow Justice Minister, right? So if you've got a senior politician who's pronouncing guilt, which he did, he described what was going on in the trial as if it had already been proven when it had not. So he was describing the defendant as guilty and explaining in very clear detail how they were guilty when they had not been convicted. Now, the risk of that is if the judge believes that some members of the jury have been swayed by that, they can't let the trial continue because it's not a fair trial. So the trial collapses. At the very least, you may have to dismiss those jurors and get new ones in, depending on when it happens. You may end up having the whole trial collapse. And then the guilt, if they are guilty, which this person has been convicted, so they are guilty. But if they are guilty, they get away with it. So this is what's called contempt of court. So Robert Jenrick publicly pronouncing on this was a contempt of court. So how did he nearly get arrested? Well, according to the Liverpool Echo, because I haven't been following this too closely, what happened was both the prosecution and the defence both went to the judge and said, hang on a minute, this is going wrong, this is dodgy. And the prosecution wrote, and the police wrote to Jenrick, contacted Jenrick and said, can you remove that bloody post? Which he did. So he did do that. So I'll read the relevant bit here. If I can find it now. Mr. Jenrick's comments were raised in court by prosecutor Alex Leach, KC, on July 2nd. Mr. Leach told Mr. Justice Goose, without the presence of the jury, because obviously you don't want to influence the jury, so the jury are out of it at this point. The post is problematic because it delivers as apparent fact what the prosecution relies on. And this is the prosecutor. This is the prosecutor saying, you know, because they're the one who want to convict the guy, right? But they're saying, hang on, this isn't fair. The law of contempt protects the judicial process. Contempt of court happens when someone risks unfairly influencing a court case. In extreme cases, contempt of court, which threatens the jury's ability to come to an independent verdict, can result in a suspension of proceedings or even a retrial. Ms Goodwin told the court that Mr Jenrick, a qualified solicitor, should know better than to share a hard-lined opinion about ongoing proceedings. She said, we ask he reflects carefully as a shadow Lord Chancellor should. You know, he is shadowing the Justice Minister, the person who's in charge of the judiciary. We ask he thinks and refrains from commenting further. And then it says, I think later on, yeah, so Jenrick took it down. And then it says, Justice Goose told the courtroom that there was a danger of commenting as Mr Jenrick had, and this was ill thought through given it's an ongoing trial. However, he said steps by the prosecution to ensure the post were removed were adequate. In other words, let us say Robert Jenrick had refused to take the post down, because the judge is basically saying there's no need for me to take further action because the prosecution have dealt with it. In other words, they've persuaded Jenrick to take it down. Let's say he hadn't. The judge would then have had to do something. That doing something would have been to order Jenrick's arrest. And you can be in prison for up to 2 years for contempt of court. I think it's up to 2 years. Am I playing any old world now? No, I'm not. But there we go. Convinced there's a secret Tory party working behind the government. Why were the houses built in Rwanda in April? I assume you mean the Tory government here. And Sunak ran on sending people there all the way up to 4th of July. Well, I mean, so something actually did come out about that in terms of the Rwanda plan over this summer. I did a video on it, which changes everything. Because I was imagining... So you think to yourself, why did Rishi, when everyone had it in their heads he was going to call the election in autumn, you know, they thought the economy might improve by then a bit. It didn't, but they thought it might. So why did they call... God, could you imagine if Sunak was in charge when the riots were going on? Good, Bennett. Anyway, imagine... I imagined the reason he called the election in summer, because remember, I was saying for like almost a year before the actual election, he's not going to call it in autumn 2024. How can he? How can he? Because he'll get blown up over the Rwanda scheme. The Rwanda scheme was dead in the water. Just because they passed that legislation, the courts hadn't said that it was suddenly fine. The courts hadn't... Remember, the courts had said there were multiple laws stopping the Rwanda plan being legal. It wasn't just the European Convention on Human Rights, and it wasn't just UK domestic law. So no one seriously believes that Sunak's Rwanda bill made it all fine. It didn't. So the Rwanda plan was never going ahead. So if he'd have waited till after summer, it would have been... Because he reckoned there were going to be flights going in July, right? There wouldn't have been. Actually, I think some were supposed to be going in June. There wouldn't have been. So he'd have been caught out, and that would have been a disaster for them. So that's why I thought he called the election when it is. But then there was some new news. Something came out that it was going to be announced. What was it now? Some really major government... It was to do with the, you know, the data breach we had where a load of Afghan names had gone out. I think it was that. I did do a video on it, and now I'm trying to remember what it was because there's so many things that came out afterwards. I think it was that there was a risk. I'm pretty sure that was it. There was a risk that was going to come out. And when Rishi Sunak... Then what happened was Rishi Sunak's government then lodged an appeal because they had an injunction in place to stop anyone reporting on this data breach, right? Of like names of Afghan asylum seekers coming out. So they had an injunction in place so no one could report on it. And there's a judge that had ruled that actually that injunction should stop. Now, the government then successfully appealed it and the injunction carried on. But the day when Rishi Sunak found out that that judge had said that the injunction should be removed, the next day he called the election. So now we're thinking maybe he called the election because of that. Right, that'd be interesting. But anyway, Michael, they're saying Jenrick, Farage, Tice, all above the law, so they think ask each one what leaving the ECHR, exact details and what that would mean in writing for everyone. Yeah, they don't do details. They don't do details, do they? Do I think he might do a Nixon and vacate the White House? Well, I really don't know. What I do know is that this is unusual. This is not like the normal State of the Union address. And Trump is used to like doing press conferences in the Oval Office and that being broadcast anyway. This is unusual. This is an unusual thing. The fact that he hasn't been seen in public for like nearly a week, and the fact that if it is a fact, again, I don't know that this is a fact, but I have seen it reported in the news. There have been news outlets saying that there's roads between the White House and this medical centre being cleared, right? So that implies that he's in hospital right now, that he's going to make the journey to the Oval Office to do this announcement and then straight back again. That's the implication to me. That's what the implication is to me. And if that is the case, if he's ill, if he's too ill to carry on, then we have a very interesting situation, because Vance would, I mean, again, how do they do it? How do they do it? Do they have Vance still be, is Trump still president? Is it a short-term thing? Is Trump just going to say, I need some treatment, but I'm still the president, but Vance is deputising for me, right? Or is it a formal resignation with Vance stepping up to be president? That will start the rumour mill off, because there are people, I mean, when I've been doing this series on what if Trump dies, right? And I did say in the videos, he doesn't have to die, he just has to be incapacitated. There's plenty of speculation about this was the plan from the beginning. This was the plan from the beginning. Trump is the Trojan horse to get Vance in, because Vance, I mean, I don't know, right? But, you know, there's all sorts of credible scenarios. There's a lot of people believe that Vance wasn't really Trump's pick, that he was Peter Thiel's pick, you know, and he was like, the people behind Project 2025, he was their pick. And they wanted Trump to get in, lay the groundwork, and then they wanted him gone. Now, who knows? I don't know, but it is interesting. Philly's James O'Brien 2.0. Only I am willing to talk about trans issues. But anyway. White ex-public school commits a contempt of court naughty boy. Pointless having laws that are not enforced. The judges now set a precedent on how much contempt you can get with. Now, I wouldn't say that. I do agree with you. Again, it is a case of, you know, posh white boy gets away with it. To be fair, you rarely get judges arresting people for contempt of court. It is more common than you think for people to comment on ongoing proceedings. It is normal to just tell them to remove the posts, to retract what they've said, rather than go straight to arrest. I know many of us think he's completely off the rails, and I think he is. I think he is like Suella Braverman. Suella Braverman, remember, was completely off the rails, right? Liz Truss, remember, promoted her, and Suella Braverman repaid her by instantly briefing against her. Suella Braverman was a completely loose cannon. Not under Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson had control of her, right? Somehow. Liz Truss had no control of her. Suella Braverman was like, the shackles were off when she was made Home Secretary. Then she was sacked for like risking national security. Then she came back under Sunak, and she was a loose cannon again. She didn't calm down at all. Robert Jenrick's like that. Robert Jenrick should have been sacked. If he won't resign, he should have been sacked. He should have been. He's the Shadow Justice Secretary, and he's breaking the law. Multiple times he's broken the law. You know, and contempt of court, really, you need political leaders setting. I mean, I had an issue when Jill Mortimer, who was the Tory MP for Hartlepool, she won the by-election in the last Parliament. And she started talking about an ongoing case. And the Speaker didn't stop her. I actually wrote to the Speaker's office saying, why didn't you stop her? I didn't get I got a response, but I didn't get an answer. Do you know what I mean? I didn't get an answer. Because that's not protected by parliamentary privilege, by the way. Parliamentary privilege protects you from being sued in the civil courts. It doesn't protect you from criminal prosecution. So, you know, you can still commit a contempt of court in Parliament. So I don't think MPs, I mean, no one should. Like, journalists know not to. Journalists know not to commit contempt of court. MPs really should face, even if, you know, I'm not suggesting we need to go straight to arresting them as long as they comply, which he did. But really, Parliament should take action against MPs who undermine the fairness of a judicial process. Because you cannot, everyone must have a fair trial. This goes back to, you know how they say about the Tories undermining judges and things like that, and they attack people like Keir Starmer for defending like terrorists and stuff in the past. And you try and explain the cab rank rule, which is that you cannot convict people of serious crimes if those people do not have access to legal counsel, because you have to. A conviction is not safe if if the defendant is not defended. They have to be defended, right? So that you can be convinced that the conviction is secure, that it's sound. And even then, it's not always. You do still have miscarriages of justice, but you know you must have a system that tries to avoid a miscarriage of justice. So for that, you must make sure defendants have a fair trial. You have to give them every opportunity to. They don't have to prove their innocence, remember. They just have to demonstrate that there's sufficient doubt about their guilt. Absolute cornerstone of a fair judicial process. But anyway, I'll catch up with some more comments here. Before we quickly just finish off maybe with Jeremy Clarkson, because he's been a funny bunny. Multiple US commentators don't believe that MAGA and Vance is compatible. It is interesting, isn't it? I am in two minds, honestly. I'm completely on the fence on it. Because on the one hand, I can see how Vance might be more MAGA than Trump, really, in terms of what he'd like to do. But on the other hand, I can also see him struggling to keep all the different factions together, because he's not charismatic, you know. The mascara doesn't do it for him. That's not enough. You know, he's obviously saying Trump. Oh, we need the war paint. We need slap on our face. He's not sufficiently committed. Vance is Thiel's boy. Yeah, he absolutely is. Vance will be more of a vessel. Trump is much more of a wild card. In terms of the tariffs. Yeah, I don't think any of the rest of them wanted the tariffs. The tariffs is, I think, purely Trump. I think it's pure Trump, the tariffs. So yes, and you could be right on that one indeed. But here's a question then. Could Vance, we'll probably do a live stream on this tomorrow anyway, because as I say, shit's kicking off tonight. Could Vance actually get rid of the tariffs? Because wouldn't that look like would he dare look like he's undoing Trump's work? I don't think he would. I think he would try and slowly take the sting out of the tariffs, you know, exemption stuff like. I think that's what he'd do. I think rather than cancel the tariffs, I think he'd just start to implement more and more exemptions to the point where, you know, you got rid of them in real terms. So it's like, oh yeah, 20% tariffs on EU goods. But just individual exemptions on like all EU goods. So technically 20%, but it doesn't apply to very much at all. Maybe Kinder eggs that they don't like anyway. So maybe that would happen, because I'm not sure I see Vance having the balls to look like he's cancelling a Trump policy. Because I think he'd have to act like, I think Vance he can't be the Messiah, so he has to be a prophet, doesn't he? He has to be the person, oh, I'm communicating with Trump from, well, as it happens, from hospital, right? Because he'll still be alive, yeah? In fact, that's even better for Vance. He doesn't even have to pretend he's communing with the dead, right? He can just say, oh, I'm visiting Trump every day and getting his instructions. We can still pretend he's carrying out Trump's instructions. But that would be undermined if it looked like he was cancelling keynote Trump policies. David there saying Rayner did nothing illegal, even according to accusers. It's not even that she didn't do anything illegal. Now, I don't like the behaviour, I have to say. I am going to say someone like me gets to criticise Rayner, because what she is doing is tax avoidance, which I don't support morally. And also, given that Labour are trying to clamp down on tax avoidance, I think senior members of the government should should provide an example to others. You know, if you're trying to say that people should not use tax avoidance schemes, I don't really think the Deputy Prime Minister should. So I can criticise her, right? But the right wing don't get to criticise her because they're the ones who created all these tax avoidance loopholes in the first place. But no, even the Sun were not trying to say she's broken any, not even laws, even rules. Like, they've said all this stuff, and yet they have to concede in their articles that she has done nothing. She's done nothing wrong. They just think it's hypocritical. They don't get to think it's hypocritical. I do. I don't like it. I don't like tax avoidance at all. And if you've got, and I approve of the fact that Rachel Reeves is trying to really come down on tax avoidance quite hard. I approve of that. It's actually going to be a pain in the ass for me. Next year, I have to start using some software to do my tax returns. It's going to link directly with HMRC. It's an attempt to stop people fiddling their taxes right, which I approve of, but it's going to be hassle for me because they're not making it easy. There's this thing you can do on HMRC where you put in what sort of incomes you get, so that it can try and, because it recommends you some software. It'll say, oh, you want this software. So I put and I thought mine's quite simple. I put my things in, I answered the questionnaire, and it came back and says, sorry, there's no single bit of software that'll do the job for you. So I'm going to have hassle, right? But I approve of moves to clamp down on tax avoidance. But there we go. Phil, can you subdue my tidy mind and straighten up the stack of boxes behind you? Yeah, maybe I'll do that later. Tell you what, let's have a look. Hold on. There. Is that better? He's covering them up now. There you go. No, they're no longer there. Out of sight, out of mind. Last thing, though, I just want to spend a few minutes just on Jeremy Clarkson. There was a really great post. There's a couple of outlets saying that he's thinking of going to Dubai. And I saw on Twitter, the Keir Starmer parody account saying, who says I've not achieved anything in the last year? Jeremy Clarkson may leave the country. Little hint, though. First of all, it's quite funny. Again, just proving that he's just basically a greedy Tory. He's just a greedy Tory. Why is he moaning about Keir Starmer? Because he don't want to pay taxes. He's a tax dodger, basically. And as I've already just made clear, I don't like that behaviour. But, and the fact that he's anti-Brexit is neither here nor there. It just means he's not a complete cretin, right? Because again, Brexit's harmful to him as well, right? He just sees that. He's just interested in himself. The pub near me, which is actually really good it has a proper chef. I really like the pub down the road from me. I don't go there for drinks, but we occasionally go there for a meal because it has a proper chef that cooks it properly. It's nice stuff, right? Proper cooked food. None of this usual shit that you get in pubs. But I'm going to have to think about it now because they've got a poster outside the pub advertising support for farms, and it's got Jeremy Clarkson on it drinking a pint. Jeremy Clarkson is no friend to farmers, right? You think, oh, but he's promoting some of the issues farmers face. What he's done is he's bought land as a tax dodge by his own admission, and the people who buy land as a tax dodge and call it a farm are raising the value of farmland beyond its commercial value. The reason why farmers are whining about inheritance tax and stuff is because their valid complaint is their land has a much higher value than its commercial return. So it's not fair. Yeah, that's a fair point. But why is farmland valued so highly? Because people buy it as a tax dodge. In fact, the more valuable the land, the better. The more valuable the land, the better. It's a bigger tax dodge. They should be upset at people like Clarkson. He's not doing farmers any favours at all. None at all. But he won't be leaving, by the way. He won't actually leave the country. First of all, I would just say he's just the latest rich white wanker to claim to be threatening to leave the country now that Labour are in power, right? He's just the latest in a long line of wankers. You go, oh, I'm leaving the country. Bollocks, are you? Right? We had it from the Pimlico plumber, didn't we? Charlie Mullins. He didn't leave. I'm leaving the country. Then it was pointed out that the country is planning on leaving too, has even higher taxes. I'm not leaving the country. I'm staying here. and I'm going to become a Reform UK candidate. So he'll probably do the same thing. Maybe he won't because he doesn't like Brexit. I don't know. But the other thing is, he actually, even though it's been reported that he's talking about going to Dubai, he wrote an article in the Sunday Times, I read it, where he does talk about it, but he says it's a shithole. Do you know why he says it's a shithole, by the way? Because there's people there. Honestly, that's what he said. That's what he said. He says, hold on, shall I find it? It's quite offensive, this article he's written, by the way. He's a proper racist. You know, he's like, you don't get many racists on this sort of anti-Brexit side, do you? Because it's sort of our thing that we're not xenophobic. But he is proper racist. This entire article is full of racial stereotyping. But this is what he says about it. The Emirate of Dubai seems to have realised this because subliminally and liminally there are adverts for the place everywhere I turn. No income tax, petrol 50p a litre, the police do what they're supposed to do, and it's sunny most of the time. What's not to like? I suspect quite a lot, but figures out last week show that since 2020 the number of people thinking of moving from Britain to Dubai has risen by 420%. There was a 50% jump in the last 12 months alone. So basically what he's saying is there was a bigger jump when the Tories were in power. So it was when the Tories were in power loads of people started talking about going to Dubai, not Labour. But anyway, never mind that. Then he says, I used to enjoy Dubai back in the early 90s when there were no people in it and only one hotel. But today it feels like the bastard love child of Las Vegas and Mickey Mouse. So the reason he doesn't like Dubai now is because there's people there. He don't like people, basically. So he's not going to go to Dubai because there's people, unless they clear out all the people. That's what he's saying. Wish you left the country, Phil. Sorry, I can't. The Brexiteers stopped me. Apologies for that. I'm stuck here with all of you. It's like the scene in Watchmen, isn't it? I'm not trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with me. The Brexiteers trapped me with them. There we go. So in Denmark, very much tax. The rich do not leave. The billionaires are still here. Well, there is a sense in which, because it's also consistent. Now, there is a sense in which we can't pretend otherwise. Two things I'll say about that, because, you know, the wealth tax is a big thing these days. First of all, if you raise taxes a lot, you are going to get some people going. But the second thing I keep trying to point out, when we talk about billionaires leaving the country, they're not really leaving the country. They're just writing on a form that they're leaving. And that changes the whole tax thing, right? Because if you're a foreign billionaire, particularly, where you have to pay taxes depends very much on where your primary residence is. So a billionaire, remember, billionaires in Britain don't live just in Britain. They don't live in Britain. They spend some time in Britain and they spend some time in a house in a different country. And they might live in 5 different countries, but they have to put one down as their primary residence, right? So all these billionaires have to do is change where their primary residence is. Just like Rayner did with her flat in Hove, right? You just decide, you can only have one. You can't fiddle it, so you pretend but you choose one primary residence. So I can't choose one because I don't own, actually, even my wife owns this, but I live in one place. So I don't get to claim my primary residence is somewhere else because it's patently not. But if you actually do have multiple homes in multiple countries and you do move around them, you can put whatever you like down. So that's all that happens. It's not that billionaires actually leave the country. They just change where they assign their primary residence, and that changes the tax overnight. So, you know, you have to be smarter about it. There was another article really recently, this weekend, from yet another expert economist saying, you can't tax mobile wealth. It don't work. But they're not saying forget about it. They were saying, like, literally every other expert economist, going right back to Adam Smith. Well, they're saying tax property, right, but also land. So that's what you tax land. I would say tax land first. You can then refine property tax later. The problem with taxing property or changing the tax on property is you have to be very careful about it politically so you don't panic a load of middle class voters thinking they're going to get clobbered, right? Because the Telegraph will tell them they're going to get clobbered. So, but if you just tax land that doesn't have property on it, which this economist also said they should do, right? That's, for me, where you start. Do that to begin with. Then you can slowly bring things in. But anyway, there we go. I'm neighbour to one of the Lego billionaires. There you go. Does that mean Danish? Or their house is made out of plastic? But there we are. Thanks very much for coming on, everyone. As I say, we're going to have another stream this afternoon. I'll probably make it for about 2 o'clock. I think I could do it for 2 o'clock. We'll say 2 o'clock. Say 2 o'clock. Where I'm going to discuss what I think about the Zach Polanski Green Party show. And obviously, I'll wait a few months and then update. But we don't talk about the Green Party much, so give me a chance to talk about that. Just to forewarn it, I'm not a fan, I have to say. But thanks for coming on, everyone. Have a great rest of lunchtime, because we'll be back at 2 o'clock if you're willing. And until next time, I'll see you later.